Why do babies cry when their caregiver leaves the room? Why do some children cling tightly to a parent, while others seem totally unbothered? These questions led to one of the most influential theories in developmental psychology, attachment theory. Attachment theory explains how early emotional bonds between infants and their caregivers shape how we relate to others throughout life, in childhood, and even in adulthood. The theory began with John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist and psychoanalyst working in the mid-20th century. Bowlby believed that emotional bonds between children and caregivers were not just a byproduct of feeding or comfort, they were a key part of human survival. Drawing on both psychology and evolutionary theory, Bowlby argued that babies are biologically programmed to form attachments to caregivers because these bonds increase the chances of survival. A baby who stays close to their caregiver is more likely to be protected from danger, fed, and comforted. Bowlby's work was deeply influenced by observations of children separated from their families during World War II. He noticed that these children often showed anxiety, withdrawal, and difficulty forming relationships later in life. From this, Bowlby proposed that infants form an internal working model, a kind of mental blueprint, based on their early interactions with caregivers. If a caregiver is consistently responsive and nurturing, the child learns that the world is safe and people can be trusted. But if a caregiver is distant, inconsistent, or neglectful, the child may develop a sense that relationships are unreliable or even dangerous. But how do we measure attachment? That's where Mary Ainsworth comes in. Ainsworth, a psychologist who worked closely with Bowlby, developed a now famous observational study in the 1970s called the Strange Situation. In this study, 12 to 18-month-old infants were brought into a room with their caregiver. Over a series of short episodes, the caregiver would leave the room, a stranger would enter, and then the caregiver would return. Researchers carefully observed how the infants responded to both separation and reunion. Based on these reactions, Ainsworth identified three main attachment styles. Secure attachment. These babies were upset when the caregiver left, but calmed down quickly when they returned. They used the caregiver as a secure base from which to explore the environment. This is seen as the healthiest attachment style. Insecure avoidant attachment. These infants didn't seem to care when the caregiver left or returned. They often avoided closeness and didn't seek comfort, suggesting they may have learned to suppress their emotional needs. Insecure resistant, or ambivalent, attachment. These infants were very distressed when the caregiver left, and had trouble calming down even when the caregiver returned. They often showed clinginess mixed with anger, as if unsure whether they could trust the caregiver to meet their needs. Later research added a fourth category. 4. Disorganized attachment. These infants showed confusing or contradictory behavior, like approaching the caregiver but looking away, or freezing in place. This style is often linked to frightening or traumatic caregiving environments. So why does this matter? Attachment styles in infancy are strongly associated with later outcomes. Children with secure attachments tend to have better emotional regulation, social relationships, and academic performance. In contrast, insecure attachments can make it harder to manage stress or build trusting relationships. But it's important to remember, attachment is not destiny. While early attachment experiences matter, they are not the whole story. People can change, grow, and heal through later relationships, therapy, or life experiences. Attachment styles are tendencies, not life sentences. Modern psychology also emphasizes cultural differences in attachment behavior. For example, in some cultures, independence is valued more highly, while in others, physical closeness is encouraged longer. So, attachment styles must always be interpreted within context. In summary, Bowlby and Ainsworth's work gave us a powerful framework for understanding the emotional bond between a child and their caregiver, a bond that lays the foundation for how we connect, trust, and relate to others throughout life. In the next video, we'll explore how cognitive abilities begin to unfold in childhood, starting with the groundbreaking work of Jean Piaget.